Everyone, I'm going to talk very slowly so we can get a few more people sat down before we begin. This is a nice problem to have, obviously. We've got a full auditorium here. People in the room can obviously see that. Anyone who's joining us online, apologies. I know we're running a little bit late, but it's because of the sheer volume of people that we have here, so please do bear with us. Obviously, if you are joining online, you can watch all of these sessions on demand as well at a later date, and the same for everyone here. If anyone is not able to make it into this auditorium for this session, you will be able to watch it online. So we do have a long queue of people. We are going to have to make a start. Okay, next up we have the Sustainability Strategies Forum, and please welcome your speakers to the stage. Please. Right, our first esteemed panel of the day. Now, people aren't here to hear what I've got to say. It's all about what our speakers have to say. So in the spirit of that, I think I might just let them introduce themselves. So from the right-hand side, Magali, please introduce yourself and say where you're from and what you do.
Hi, so, yeah, it's working. Until last Friday, I was a Chief Sustainability and Innovation Officer at Holcim, Holcim being the biggest building material company in the world outside China. And I won't repeat the joke I made on stage 5 years ago, but I'm in garden leave now, so anything you want to tell me about gardening, I'm taking it.
Paolo.
Good morning, everyone. Paolo Taticchi. I'm a professor in strategy and sustainability at University College London School of Management. Very active as a consultant. I'm also one of the advisors to the Italian government on the topic of sustainability.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Whitford. I am the Vice President of Sustainability and Social Business Innovation for the Life Science business in Merck.
Morning all, my name is Garrett Quinn. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer for Smurfit Kappa, who are the largest paper-based packaging company in Europe and the only Pan-American one, so from Canada down to Chile.
Okay, thank you guys. Now, welcome everyone obviously to the Sustainable even Strategies Forum. We've had the introduction, so to begin with, I suppose it's important to ask, why is it important to have a sustainable strategy, and what does a good one look like? Paolo, I'm going to ask you that question first.
Thank you. I think it's important to focus on strategies these days because there is a lot happening in industry, a lot of changes, and a growing interest for real sustainability. I guess that's what I've been noticing in the last few years. Sustainability is becoming real. We are moving away from approaches based on CSR to embrace approaches where sustainability is becoming a part of strategy, and sustainability can actually contribute to the development of a competitive advantage in industry. Now, that comes with major implications for business and business leaders because embracing ESG is not easy. It's a process, it's a transformation. It starts from the top, so you need the top leaders of an organization to recognize that sustainability has got a strategic value and that sustainability can impact the financial performance of an organization. So something I see happening in industry is that today a lot of big corporations are investing on educational initiatives to train their top management teams so they are able to understand the value of sustainability, they are able to strategize on sustainability, they are able to integrate ESG in the decision-making processes to execute the sustainability strategies. So there is really a lot happening, and this is very exciting.
Okay, thank you. Jeffrey, what's a good strategy look like to you?
Well, I don't know if there is necessarily a good one. I think it's going to be different for everyone. One of the things that for me was a takeaway, I lived in Germany for 3.5 years, and I had a cultural training class as part of that experience. And what I learned was that I was not German. So the diagram that came out was really about preparation and planning and the way of working. And what was fascinating to me was you spend a lot more time up front in Germany, according to this cultural survey. planning and preparing, and then you spend a small amount of time executing because you planned it all. Now, my lived experience is completely different from that. Everything kind of goes awry, so what you plan for doesn't necessarily happen. So I'm more of the kind of build the plane while you're flying it type of person. And I think for me, what is important about a good strategy is one that's executable, that delivers results and impact, and that you can measure and you can get people engaged in. So that component of something, I really am more in the camp of spending an appropriate amount of time up front, but really thinking about the execution component and fine-tuning and updating that strategy and keeping it to be a living element that really delivers results. I think that's when you know it's a good strategy. Are you getting results? Are you getting people engaged and helping them move the needle in a more accelerated fashion?
Well, that's certainly how we're running this show today, I think. We're definitely flying it while we're building it. Magali, what's your take on this?
On which one? On why you need a strategy, or what is a good
What
strategy?
does a good strategy look like?
Okay, because what you need a strategy, I was going to say, is because we are all good people, and we all know it's good to do it, to save the people and the planet. That's why we are all good human beings. Now, a good strategy looks like, I think what was just said is pretty good already. What I maybe would add is make sure, and maybe because I'm an engineer, I tend to look at it at the scientific way, is make sure everything is rigorous and scientific. And it's quite funny, the good thing about sustainability is you learn words every day. So greenwashing, now everyone understands that. Now you have got green shifting, green hashing. Don't ask me what they mean, I'm not English. But I think what the level of understanding, once you have passed all the engagement, etc., the level of understanding of sustainability, and that's really good news, is raising every single day, like between the way investors understand it, the public, everybody. And it's becoming so and so mainstream that a good strategy, in addition to engaging people, have a real plan, etc., has to be rigorous and scientific and has to deliver.
Thank you. And you touched there on the point of greenwashing. Garrett, I'm going to come to you with this one. What steps can companies take to increase the transparency and accountability in their sustainability reporting?
I'd say having it assured is probably the easiest answer. So is someone checking that what you say you're doing, you're actually doing? Regulation is bringing you there anyway. So for those of you that are considering what your strategy should be and your transparency plans, it is a matter of time before you're in scope anyway. And then I think with that assurance, you need to be reporting on what's material to your stakeholders. So that's where you get into understanding what's important to them. It's not just investors, it's not just customers, it's the communities, it's your internal employees, it's the regulation, the local government, and then reporting it. I say depending on where you are in the journey, it's trying to, GRI is a good framework. It helps you, GRI, as we kind of get more au fait with the ESRS standards in Europe, it looks like GRI is in many places more detailed. So therefore, if you're kind of waiting to see where should I go, how should I frame my reporting, GRI is a good starting place. Doing your gap analysis against that framework, and then ultimately having what you report assured, because that's where your transparency comes through.
And of course, like you said, it's a very complex picture, especially when you're looking at the variation in global standards. Paolo, how can companies address those variations in standards, around the world? What's the best policy or strategy to try and be as good as you can be, as many places as you can be?
So I'm going to add it to the first question first, and then I'm going to answer this question. So what I wanted to add is that first, you're right, it's really about execution. There was a piece of research from Harvard Business School a number of years ago that basically demonstrated that 40% of, more than 40% of well-formulated strategies do fail at the execution stage. So yes, we need to spend time on designing strategies, but it's really about execution. And the second point I wanted to make is that if you wanted to measure if a strategy is good or not, check if that strategy is helping the company to make profit. Because don't remember that we are not in the business of losing money. We are in for-profit organizations. We are in the business of making money. We wanted to do it in a good way, and sustainability should help with that. So when you are in an organization and they tell you that sustainability is a cost, there is something wrong in the strategic approach of the organization in terms of how they are looking into integrating sustainability into strategy. Sustainability is really about a triple bottom line approach. You need to create economic value, value for the planet, value for people. On the second question, I guess, again, that it's an interesting time. I remember when I started working in this field back in 2007, I became one of the first consultants in the US to be accredited with the GRI framework to write sustainability reports. At the time, that was a new framework, probably the only one recognized internationally already. And today we have many. And this is creating a lot of trouble to CSOs. That's the reality, because you deal with a lot of metrics, you deal with a lot of frameworks, and I can guarantee that in the next month there is going to be a proposal for a new framework coming up. So it's tough. We see, of course, the convergence of these frameworks, which is good news. It's a long process, but I guess in the meanwhile, don't lose your focus, because the risk is that being bombarded with frameworks and metrics that you need to use for sustainability reporting, you kind of lose the focus that that's not the ultimate objective of what you're doing. It's not about reporting. It's about building a sustainable business. That's the objective. And then you need to kind of disclose your performance, and you need frameworks to do that. So I guess don't overstress the importance of reporting in organizations. In the future will be simplified, but keep the focus on strategy, because that's what you need.
And just sticking with this briefly, Jeffrey, obviously your role has a global remit. What are the biggest challenges that you're finding when it comes to implementing those?
Yeah, I think one of the things is I do not spend time worrying about the differences of the frameworks, right? We would just wear ourselves out, because there are so many different things happening in so many geographies of the world. What is the way that you can exceed all of those limits, right? I may be a slight overachiever. My team may be slightly annoyed with me because of that. But it really provides us an opportunity to say, this is the bar, and the bar is high. And to keep that bar and maintain the trust with our stakeholders, that is what we have to shoot for and consistently hit on a daily basis. And that means when we talk about sustainability and internally with our teams, we're talking about them in specific numbers. What was the carbon reduction related to that project? Why did that matter? How is that helping with the goal? When we're talking the products we sell to our customers, why do we consider that a greener alternative? What are the benefits that are being added to the product that are transparently available to our customers with the supporting literature or data points that are on the product detail pages so they've got access to them? And I think when you think about it in terms of executing that and pulling it through, it makes this discussion about different framework this, different framework that, you've got the same data source, right? You have one source of truth, and you pull that source of truth to apply for all of these different reporting frameworks. But ultimately, by having transparency and accountability at the top of the pyramid, and that's what you're shooting for, the rest of that kind of becomes noise, because your lowest common denominator is what you've set really being a high bar.
Okay, thank you. Now, we are going to have time at the end of this session, hopefully, for a bit of Q&A. So if you do have some questions forming in your mind, we will come to you later on. The way we'll do that is if you just put your hand up, and then we will bring a microphone out to you as well. So there will be an opportunity to ask some questions towards the end. Magali, coming back to you, this is always a struggle when companies have to measure the social and environmental impact of their initiatives and communicate that to the various stakeholders involved. Is it getting easier to do that measurement and that benchmarking, do you think?
I think we are quite lucky in the cement sector, because there's a good news about being part of the hard-to-abate sector, is that everyone focuses on that, right? And that's why I like to recall it full of opportunity sector. Now, we've been measuring our CO2 since 1990, maybe even before. So for us, measuring CO2 is done. It's part of the normal process, etc. Measuring social impact is a bit different, but this is where the triple bottom line comes in so well. And frankly, again, there's a lot of frameworks that exist, a lot of company experts in it. I'm like you, I don't want my team to spend their time reporting. I want my team to spend their time finding the next step. How do we decarbonize faster? How do we have a greater impact? And again, this is where, as a part of the construction company or world, we can have an incredible impact because there's about 1.6 billion people today who don't have a proper roof over their head. So we can find ways to not only help them to get out of that condition, but also doing in a complete decarbonized way. So this is where there's a world of opportunities. We have been doing triple bottom line or IPNL, integrated PNL reporting for now since 2014. So will be our 10th years next year. We've been measuring that, but again, for me, I agree with Jeffrey, it's beside the point. Each company understands their impact. You just need to look at yourself. Forget the framework, forget everything else. Look at where is my impact? Where is my positive impact? Where is my negative impact? And it's not that complicated if you know your business. And then just get going and work on it. And if the framework is smart, they should reflect that work you are doing. So you're not going to adapt your work to the framework. It should be the contrary. And at the end, it's going to all come together.
Garrett, does that reflect your experience? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah. I think it comes down to like sustainability in general is a complex topic, and so impact, I guess, in my mind, it is how do you tell the so what? So when someone goes, well done, you've got a 150-page document. So what? Do you read that, or do you engage with a company and actually get that feeling of, oh, you are having an impact, positive or negative? If it's negative, what are you doing about it? If it's positive, what are you doing to make it better? And so it depends on the industry you're in. Some of it may be fairly obvious. So in our case, we recycle over 8 million tons of predominantly old boxes. So it's kind of clear, people get it. But then in other industries, it's not that clear. So that's where I think the challenge is how do you make it relatable? And then depending on the people that are looking for it, impact means different things to different people. We would have investors asking us, why don't you do the following? And we'd be saying no, because that does not make sense for us. And that's bordering on greenwashing. So I think it's being true to yourself, being transparent, back to your original question, having it assured, but trying to make it as digestible as possible. Because I think that's where we're losing this story, relating back to Paolo's point. I think our profession is losing that badly, that it's a very complex topic, driven by regulation, driven by frameworks, driven by all these different things. And actually, the vast majority of people just want to know the so what. And I think that's our challenge, and it's our opportunity.
You sparked a bit of a conversation here. I'm going to go to Paolo first, Magali, then I'll come to you. Paolo.
I want to react to what you said.
Yeah. So I guess if I have to give you a scientific answer to the question you asked, I believe there is no scientific knowledge in terms of how we should be measuring social impact. And until now, I've not met companies that are really able to do that well, okay? I think it's an area where there is a lot of research going on, and hopefully we will reach best practices soon. I guess what is more clear now is that there are problems that we need to address, okay? One is that when you look at the way companies talk about social impact and measure social impact, very often they focus on inputs, and that's not enough. We need to look at outputs and measure outcomes. And measuring outputs is okay, it's relatively easy. Measuring outcomes is where the trouble comes, okay? So how can I create processes in an organization so I can measure the input of a project today, the output tomorrow, and the impact of that project 20 years from now, okay? That's what we are trying to do. The second big challenge is that when you look at measuring social impact, it can't be only the perspective of one organization. Okay, you are part of an ecosystem, and you really need to focus on the ultimate beneficiaries of these impact projects. Okay, so for example, we are doing some research on this at UCL School of Management, and we recently published some guidelines that try to help, for example, impact investors in engaging in different ways, different stakeholders of social impact projects at the different stages of an impact project, okay? Because there is a life cycle that you need to consider. So I believe we are not there yet. We can kind of qualitatively appreciate the social impact of organizations, but to be able to arrive to a point where we can say, actually, this is the social impact of this project, this is comparable, I can compare two organizations or two projects, we are not there yet.
Magali?
I just wanted to react to something you said at the very start, which is sustainability is complex. I'm sure you do not really mean that, but I just want to make sure that we don't get people scared off by sustainability, because that could be like, ooh la la, it's so complex, I don't want to touch it. It's actually not that complex, and this is where halls like ours are all about, is to, I sometimes call myself, I am a translator. I'm taking what the scientific people and the super technical people are saying and making it into something that is actionable by the operation people that they understand easily. And my job is to completely decomplexifying that topic to make it easier. And I just wanted to clarify that, because I'm afraid that people get the word that, oh, I can't do sustainability because it's too complex. It's not, once you have turned it down into action plan.
Okay, well, this could be a bit of a debate coming here. Jeffrey, Jeffrey, is it complex or is it really straightforward?
It is. I have a slightly different experience. Maybe I need to go work with Magali. Our business sells 300,000 different products, and it ranges from chemicals that are used in small-scale academic experiments to things that pharma companies are using to develop life-saving treatments or therapies, devices, instruments, biologics. All of those things have different profiles. And the topic on the social impact then becomes even more complex when you're looking at UK modern slavery, DE&I, equitable pay, how you're kind of lifting all boats. Then layer in topics like biodiversity, decarbonization. For us, it is complex. Going back to the strategy topic, when we went through a strategic development focus, my boss said to me, can we not just focus on like 2 or 3 projects? And I was like, unfortunately not. If so, my life would be a lot easier. But we've really got to address the entire product life cycle. And there are so many different points within that. If you're thinking about where we source raw materials from, for us, that's 40,000 suppliers that we're working with to get all of those materials to make 300,000 products. Then you think about, how do we develop and design those products and bring them to life? How do they actually get manufactured at 60+ manufacturing sites around the world, then get distributed, packaged and distributed at 100+ distribution points, then going to the customer? What happens when all of those millions of customers use them, and at the end of life, what do they do with them? If there's something left, if there's not, what can they do with the packaging? And then how do we really look at that from a circularity standpoint and start to pull that material back when there is something left over to plug it back in? But do we understand the science, and will those polymers work in something? And oh, by the way, will the FDA or EMA approve a recycled material in a device that is going to potentially be injected into a human being, even though it's not touching the medication? That's the complexity that I am dealing with.
Come to the cement world.
Right? New job opportunity.
I think I'm going to move from the middle here.
But I think the point that Magali makes is exactly correct, though. Our jobs are figuring out, how do we take the complexity out to help people focus. So I completely agree with that point, that we have to be effective translators, which goes back to what Garrett was talking about of the so what. Why does it matter? And our ability to be really expert storytellers and direct people to the point that matters, and why we're focusing on certain things. What I have learned is I have never been more wrong in my life on everything, right? I can talk to 3 different people, and I'm wrong about different things with each one of those different people. And that's just it. I've got to be okay with being wrong, because everyone's going to have a different perspective on what's important and why we need to drive it forward, and that is okay. We need these voices at the table who are advocating for different things, and we then have to make the decision on how we prioritize and then communicate the prioritization and why we're doing it that way.
Thank you. Everyone does have a different perspective, so let's make this a little bit more interactive. Let's have a show of hands, and this is going to be very black and white. Is it complex or is it simple? So hands up for complex. Okay, and simple? It's complex. For people joining us remotely who don't have the benefit of seeing that, I would say it was probably 90%. Do you think 90% complex? Maybe higher?
Can we ask the professor how scientific that methodology was?
That was pure science right there, believe me. That was simple. Okay, let's move on. Garrett, I'm going to come to you. Obviously, feel free to defend your stance there as well at any stage. But what are the key trends and innovations that are shaping the future of sustainable strategies? So what we're going to see in the near future that is going to help deliver the strategy and drive it forward?
Yeah, well, I guess back to, as you say, defend my position, and we'll go down a rabbit hole here. I think I will meet you halfway, and I think Jeffrey kind of touched on it, that is our role as CSOs in our companies, is how do you take a complex topic, make it relatable and digestible to your stakeholders. But the reason I say sustainability, I mean in general, like, why are we not delivering on what the world needs? Why is there not a simple kind of COVID reaction? There's an issue, wear your mask, social distance, do this, that and the other, you reduce the risk, you should be fine. And it's not that straightforward when it comes to all these sustainability topics. So I think it's complex. You've got lots of feedback from I was mentioning to Jeffrey beforehand, the meteorologists, European Meteorologists Association met. They're talking about how Europe was the fastest heating region in the world. And they said, why? And they said the hypothesis is because the air is clearer and cleaner in Europe. So can you imagine if you're the public listening to this and you say, oh, so hang on, because Europe has a cleaner skyline because it's less polluting, we're warming quicker than everywhere else. That's what I mean by complex. As in you're kind of going, oh, so we should be dirtier so that we warm slower. So that's what I mean by complex, I guess. So meet you halfway on that one. In terms of trends, I would say it's the regulatory piece is, if it does what it's supposed to do, it's going to drive the transparency, it's going to drive the comparability, and what that should do is then drive your stakeholders saying, actually, that's not good enough, you need to change, or I really like that, I didn't realize you did that, could you do more? And I think that's what it should do, but CSRD, first batch is going to be out Q1 25. So it's going to be years before that's being up and running properly. Because if you look at the people who are going to assure your reporting, they don't have enough people to do the assurance. So the people who are going to check all this stuff, and that's a key part of CSRD, is your independent assurance. The big four are already saying, well, they're not saying officially, is that they're going to struggle to get people with the skills to actually do the assurance. So I think that's probably going to be one of those trends. And then I think collaboration, I think there's a lot of maturing going on, and it probably varies by industry, whether it's intra-industry collaboration, so how do you work within your industry to try and drive good practice and solve your issues, and then it's cross-industry collaboration. And I would say from our perspective in the packaging business, we're good at cross-industry, we're not good at intra-industry, because there's that competitive, I want to get a competitive advantage by coming up with a smarter solution than peer A and peer B, and that's not right, that needs to change. But when you look at cross-industry, it's really, I think that's quite exciting, and I think that will continue to be exciting in the short to medium term.
Okay, thank you. Paolo, can we have this sort of the academic, scientific view of where we're headed?
No, I definitely support what has been said. I guess in terms of topics, I believe we come from 5 years where the focus has been a lot on decarbonization and equality, diversity, and inclusion. If I should bet on the next 5 years topics, biodiversity is one, and the second one is the circular economy. Companies are going to start strategizing on these topics because they are receiving a lot of attention from investors, from a variety of stakeholders. I see a lot of scientific research being developed with a focus on these topics. So I think it's exciting, and this will shape strategy.
Thank you. You talked there, I'll touch on this briefly. You mentioned there the circular economy. Jeffrey, how can businesses shift towards a more circular business model, and what are the key challenges, because we are getting short time, what are the key challenges in adopting that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we think about with circularity, and especially with plastics, right? So one of the reasons why the COVID vaccines happened so quickly and were so effective was really about how they were manufactured. So you had mRNA as a technology, but they were also manufactured not using big stainless steel systems. They were instead manufacturing using single-use bags. So you've got, once again, trade-offs, good and bad. But the reality is, if you look at the data from a life cycle analysis standpoint, the single-use bag, when a recycling system is present, is actually a smaller footprint than the single-use or the stainless steel tanks, because of the amount of energy and water that has to be used for sterilization. But at the end of the day, this comes back to it is an economic model, right? There is a financial component that we have all got to start changing when it comes to things like plastics. And getting plastics back into things, so reusing those polymers, not having them go to be burned off or to be used as oil again, but actually getting the polymer back in, creates the economic model that you've got to have, because you can feel great about putting it in a recycling bin. But the question is, what is happening afterwards? How is that coming back into something? And so we, as society, need to demand that there's more recycled content in things, because that starts giving the market signals that then change the economic model of creating market demand for actually doing something with those materials rather than them just going to waste. And I think that for us is one of the things from a circularity standpoint, is really having an economic model that works, that we can create that demand and start the shift to make recycling technologies effective, energy efficient, move to things like biological or enzymatic recycling, so that we can really make that transformation, that circularity happen in a more effective fashion.
Okay, thank you. Right, do we have any questions in the audience? Oh, we do. Do we have the microphone? Is Daisy there? If you just keep your hand up, please. Ah, surprise me. If you just start by stating your name and where you're from, please.
Sure. My name's Anna Mitchell. I'm the at Pelsis Group as Chief Transformation Officer, and I used to be at British American Tobacco in charge of sustainability and communications. And my question is really around reporting frameworks and measuring. So one of the first speaker was making the point that many companies have made commitments towards carbon neutrality and net zero, but when you actually look at who's meeting those commitments, it drops to something like 14%, which is why I'm really interested in reporting, and something one of the speakers said about the new reporting frameworks that are coming out. There's so many frameworks, you follow GRI, but there was talk about having your metrics audited in the same way as your financial metrics, which we did at VAT a couple of years ago by one of the big four accounting firms, and it was a shocker, but it was really good because it holds people's feet to the fire internally to meet the commitments that they're saying. So what's happening, long-winded question, on the reporting frameworks, because there was talk of a global framework that would come in with that would also include the double materiality and financial impact side of it. Has that moved on at all? Probably one for...
Who'd like to take that?
So if we are talking about ISSB, which is International Sustainability...
It's for the internet. It's one of the accounting ones.
Yeah, it's coming out very soon. I think it's also depending on the country. So, for example, TCFD. Sorry, getting very technical here, but it's not complex, I promise. Which is the Task Force for Climate Financial Disclosure. Yeah. So TCFD. My company is based in Switzerland, is now going from next year going to be compulsory to report as per TCFD. Mm-hmm. And to have our result, our 2023 result, will have to be audited by the board and reported at the AGM, like the financial one. Yeah. So that's really, for that, Switzerland is quite advanced. TCFD has now been integrated into ISSB. Right. So what we are saying is ISSB, which is this International Sustainability and Engineering Board, what they promised we're going to do, and the chairman of that is the ex-CEO of Danone, so someone who understands the business well, was to kind of have all the things reporting to it. So for TCFD it worked. Now for the other framework, I love the fact you talked about nature, because that's my big passion, not just because of gardening, but because I think nature should be on everyone's agenda. Mm-hmm. So we are part of the TNFD this time, framework. But the TNFD framework itself, so we are a member of that task force, is being framed as we speak. So I think they also need to wait for a bit of maturity before it all goes in, but it looks good. Okay. There's progress bit. Sorry.
So this was the point on the complex to simple side of it. It is really complex, partly because of the reporting requirements if you're a big company, but it's good complexity because it forces you to meet your commitments, because it's audited in the same way your financial commitments are. But the job as communicators is to try and take that complexity and make it simple and something that your stakeholders internally and externally can buy into. So I think it's both.
Okay, diplomatic. Okay, thank you for your question. We've got time for one more very quick one. Just, gentleman down at the front here, please. And again, if you can just state your name and where you're from, please try and keep the question brief and also any answer brief as well, please.
Sure. Hi, my name's Ivor Tucker. I'm a director of a company called Generation C, which aims to connect the climate stories of businesses like yours with schools and school kids, so they can move kids from climate anxiety to climate optimism. And I was actually talking to one of the Smurfit Kappa ladies outside before we started, and she mentioned you focus a lot on reporting, and that's fine, but the reality is that those reports will get read by specialists, they'll get read by auditors or whatever. They don't get read by the general public. So how do you plan as companies to connect with a wider audience and make sure particularly that the next generation understand these issues and understand there are solutions that are being applied and not just all the doom and gloom that they read about or hear about every day?
Yeah, you're dead right. And I guess that is something that we've changed in recent years. So from an assurance perspective, we would have had people saying, why can't you be more like Company A in the way they disclose? Because it's much more relatable, much more energizing, but it wasn't assured. So you found, well, do you want something that's entertaining and digestible? And well, ideally you want both, that it's entertaining, it's digestible, and it's assured. For our perspective, we still have a sustainability report, which is probably not the greatest read in terms of it's quite heavy, but then we have a highlights report. And that's what we try and do in 10 pages, make it really easy, really shout out, so that I'm happy to discuss it with you and get feedback, because that's what we always say. If a 10-year-old can't understand what we're saying here, we're losing. So happy to talk about our highlights report and see if it's doing that.
Another way that that's coming to life, I think, for students in particular. So we turned a shipping container into a mobile science lab, and it travels around in the US and in Europe. And next year's topic is all about green chemistry. This year it was all about contamination and what happens and how can you deal with contamination. So it's really putting an inquiry-based approach for students, but also putting them as problem solvers, giving them the tools to think about the ways that they can help address these situations and questions to ask, right? Adults, there was a great piece just yesterday, I think, on BBC at breakfast regarding sewage releases that happened in a variety of different areas across the UK. And it was interesting to see what these kids' perspective were and the questions they were asking and why is this being done. And I think that's to your point. How do we help give children more gusto to ask these questions, but also be empowered with solutions?
Okay, thank you. We will have to leave it there. Please join me in thanking our panel, Magali, Paolo, Jeffrey, and Garrett. Thank you. Thank you. Guys, if you could just make it off, just mind the step on your way down.